Welcome one and all to another episode of Nothing New Under the Sun, the podcast that delves into the mysteries of history, where the shadows of the past conceal secrets waiting to be uncovered. I'm your host, Michael. Each week we embark on a journey through time, exploring the enigmas that are puzzling us during this period. Tonight we set sail on a quest shrouded in mystery, intrigue. Did ancient people sail the Americas around 1000 BC? It is a question that challenges the foundation of our understanding of human migration and exploration. We're going to navigate through these currents, sift through the sands of time, and piece together the clues that our ancient brethren came before us. But be warned, this path we tread is fraught with danger and uncertainty, and of course ambiguity. As we peel back this big layered onion that we call history, we're going to encounter conflicting accounts, elusive artifacts, and tantalizing hints that lead us deeper into the unknown. So join me as we embark on a voyage of discovery unlike any other, and together we'll unravel the mysteries of the past, maybe shine a little light on the shadows that have long obscured the truth. So welcome to Nothing New Under the Sun, and welcome back to everyone, another episode where we dust off the cobwebs of history and shine a light on the forgotten tales of yesteryear. Today we're diving deep into the murky waters of ancient Greek. A historian named Diodorus Siculus, with his tantalizing tales of folks crossing over the Atlantic Ocean, visiting the Americas way back when. Now picture this, my dear listeners. The year is around 1000 BC, and the salty breeze of the Aegean dances through the sails of a Greek trireme. And of course Captain Diodorus is scribing away with his scrolls, and some say old Diodorus had a twinkle in his eye and a knack for spinning a yarn. But when he wrote about people venturing beyond the Pillars of Hercules, heading many days west, coming upon a landmass that had several navigable rivers, with a large, open, fertile plain flanked by large mountains, this perked our curious puppy's ears. He spoke of a land far away where the sun-kissed golden shores, strange beasts roam the wilds. Even scholars today might raise an eyebrow and say, well, hold on there, bud. I think you're spinning a tall tale taller than Zeus's thunderbolts. But let me tell you, friends, I believe Diodorus was onto something. Tonight we're going to look at the evidence piece by piece. We will not speculate, and we will not tell any tall tales ourselves, but we're going to do it in the scientific method. And then we'll make a decision for ourselves when the night is over. I will not speculate. I will not tell any tall tales myself. So we're going to raise our goblets to the tales of old and toast the spirits of exploration. And let's not forget the good old words of Diodorus Siculus, whether he was spinning a yarn or shining a light on history, hidden corners. One thing's for sure, there's nothing new under the sun, but all these stories we'll uncover along the way. Diodorus was really talking about people sailing from Mediterranean area into the Americas or not. So we're going to move on to the next piece of evidence. So buckle up and welcome aboard to the nostalgia train for another thrilling segment of Nothing New Under the Sun. Alright guys, we're going to hold on to your cherries because we're diving deep into the world of Dr. Silvana Belavanova. She was a German toxicologist around 1992. She wanted to see what ancient people did for the party time. You know, what did they do? Did they drink a lot? Did they do opium? Drugs that were known of the times? So she went and got a bunch of tissue samples from a bunch of mummies dated to around 1000 BC, and these were royal mummies. Now she was probably knee-deep in mummy wraps, armed with some test tubes and a nose for trouble, but she found cocaine and tobacco in the tissue samples that she pulled. She tested many mummies and many samples were taken, and the scientific process was followed, and she continued to get the same results. So she did what any scientific person would do. She published her results. And if you thought that they were accepted, well, you'd be wrong. She was ridiculed. Now, the thing was, the ridicule came from far and wide. Historians, archaeologists, Egyptologists all jumped on her. But not one person said that her process was faulty, that she did not follow the scientific method, or anything. When they duplicated her results, when they took new samples and tested them again, the same results were found. And this famous story is called the cocaine mummies. You can read about it online. I remember when it came out years ago, it was a controversial study, but nobody has proven it wrong since. And that's one piece of evidence that we're going to be looking at tonight. Now, we know that cocaine is found in coca leaves in Central and South America. Now, we also know that tobacco grows in the Americas. Now, the only way for those products to get to the royal mummies in Egypt was trade. That means at those time periods, the Phoenicians are the people that we would be looking at. And we know by shipwrecks that they had the boats that were capable of crossing the Atlantic. But we just don't really have any direct evidence that they did. Okay, so where are we going next? Now, Egyptologists and historians say there's no way in that time period that people sailed all the way across the Atlantic. They said they didn't have the know-how or the capability, but we know that the Phoenicians did. Now, we know that they went up through the Strait of Gibraltar to Spain, France, and Great Britain. Now, it's not a big stretch just to continue west through Iceland, Greenland, and go into where Canada is today. We know that the Vikings did it at 1200 AD, and the boats that they used weren't any more capable than the boats that the Phoenicians had at the peak of the Bronze Age. So is it a stretch that a ship could have just continued on into Canada? No, it's not. Okay, so that's piece of evidence number one, and now we're going to go to a place in Nevada called Lovelock Cave. Now, there's a tribe of Indians called the Paiute, and they tell of a fearsome race of giants with red hair. The legend had that these giants roamed the land long before the footprints of man graced the earth. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. Some say that the ancestors of the Paiute tribe, weary of these colossal beginnings, devised a cunning plan to trap and slay these giants in a cave. They chased the giants into the cave and stacked brush on the outside entrance and set it ablaze, taking the life of the Sai Te Ka, which was the name of the red-headed giants. So the fire blazed and smoke took the life of the people by sucking the oxygen out of the cave. Now you might ask yourself, could there be any truth to these ancient tales? Well, hold on to your fedoras there, folks, because the archaeologists exploring Lovelock Cave in the early 20th century uncovered a treasure trove of evidence that backs up these claims. But the scientists were stopped before they were allowed to take any samples from the mummy that was found in the cave. Because it's a very dry climate in that part of the country, and the body was well preserved. We've seen pictures of it, and they say it does not look like a Native American would. It was more described like a ginger. But no DNA was tested, no samples were taken, because it's a resting place for a person who had passed away, and the Native Americans refused scientists access to the cave any longer. Now, there are other mounds throughout the Americas where the myth of the redhead giants were buried, were also told throughout time. The question is, why redhead? Why giants? Well, it's pretty simple. At the time of the ancient Egyptians, the peak of their civilization, there were a lot of red-headed people in that region. There were quite a lot of mummies in the Valley of the Kings had red hair, like Ramses the Great, and we also have red hair of Alexander the Great, and we know that the Phoenicians were redhead and blue eyes. So, okay. Now, giants. Why a giant? Well, if you live around people your whole life and your ancestors' life, let's say that they're 5'5" and the women are 4'11", and if you rolled upon 30 men who were 5'11", 6 foot, all of them, they would be towering over you, and they'd be much larger than you. You wouldn't have a lot of experience seeing that many people that tall. And you can understand how that generation told the next generation and told the next generation, just like the fish story. The fish always gets bigger with age. Same with these stories. Someone who's 4 inches taller than you, 200 years later, it's a giant. Okay, now the question is, did they do it? And what was going to do now is take a look at a piece of evidence that I sort of threw in myself. This wasn't found in a book. It's just something I realized because I grew up in the Midwest. And the state next door to mine is called Missouri. I always like to look up the words of the states and see where their meanings come from, what sort of word it is. So I looked up the word Missouri. And it's a Native American word, and it means big canoe people. Now, when I saw that, it literally blew my mind. I was like, why would they call the Missouri River area big canoe people? And then it sort of makes sense, more or less, because we know that Native Americans use small canoes, but they did not have large ones. They did not have a word for sailing ship or a larger boat. So they would have, if they would have saw a larger ship, the only word they could have used was the only word they had. And they just would have used the word for large or bigger in front of it, like big canoe. We also know that Native Americans were known to name things after things that they saw. If you were born and there was an eagle resting on a rock, maybe your name would be a sitting eagle, for instance. So I could see a ship sailing up the Mississippi, then into the Missouri. And if Native Americans had run into these people, they would have noted it. And the Native Americans, so if there was this, for instance, so if they did have this interaction, for instance, the red-headed people, and if they did come from ancient Egypt was called Mizram in ancient times, or it would have been pronounced Mizram, Mizrahim, or Mizra. And there was another important city called Mizpah. Now I could see Native Americans interacting with these people who spoke different languages. And they might have said Mizra, Mizram, etc. And over time, that name stuck with the Native Americans for that river, because they saw people in a big canoe from Mizra. And over the next 3,000 years, Europeans come back, and they hear the Native Americans say the word Mizra, Mizra, and over time it becomes Mizra, Missouri. But I know it's a stretch on the sound, but I can't get over the fact that it was called big canoe people. I just, I think that there was something to it. They ran into these people, they got tobacco from them, but they also would have ran into other Native Americans that were more hostile. And that makes sense with the Nevada Lovelock Cave, because they probably would have tried to kill them, because they probably would have saw them as a threat. And that makes sense about the red-headed giant story. Now, obviously, that's not enough to change all the books, but I think that there's enough evidence here that deserves more conversation. It deserves other people to get involved in it, to share more information. Because I know that, for instance, Khufu built the Great Pyramid of Giza because of an inscription found in a small area inside the cave, inside the pyramid, in like the 19th century. And a lot of people think it was suspect because the person who found it spent millions of pounds of his wealth to try to find out who did build the pyramid. And right before he ran out of money, he found this inscription. And now every book, every text, every college in the world teaches the fact that Khufu built the pyramid. Now, we just talked about a lot of evidence tonight. Was it possible that Phoenicians came over here from Egypt 3000 BC? And I believe that we provided a lot more evidence that that's true than that Khufu built the pyramid. So, now, do I think that anybody's going to start debating this? Absolutely not. Changing the books is a difficult task. It's a very conservative approach, because the people who you need to hire you for your job in academics are the ones who came before you and they're invested in the status quo. They're not going to stand up and say, I guess I've been wrong for the last 40 years. It's not in human nature to do that. So, but either way, I hope that you had a wonderful time. I hope you guys learned something. If you have anything else you'd like to add into it, any more additional information, you can head over to Spotify or Apple and find my podcast, Nothing New Under the Sun. You can message me there, or go check out my YouTube channel called Always Ask Why. The channel is at AskWhy2030, at AskWhy2030. Once again, this is Michael with Nothing New Under the Sun. We're done for the night. We hope you had a wonderful time. And remember to subscribe to my podcast, and we'll be dropping another episode next week. Thank you, and have a great night.